Well, good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this very hour, we're going to be talking to James Rosen, Chief White House Correspondent for Newsmax, in the room today as the White House desperately tries to spin out of President Biden's obvious senility, now being noted in official Justice Department filings. Tim Graham will be joining us from Newsbusters at 4:30. We've got a lot to talk about with him. Certainly the media's behavior this week and Joe Biden's decision to skip that Super Bowl interview. Why did he do that? And Luke Rosiak is here from the Daily Wire at 5:30. We have a local story for you involving Fairfax County, its schools, and, unfortunately, pornography. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. What were they thinking? Were they even thinking? Did Joe Biden finally do something on his own that the White House couldn't stop him from doing by stepping up to a microphone at 8 p.m. in the evening? Joe Biden does not appear in public in the late afternoon, nevertheless the evening. And last night was a perfect example of why. After that report came out yesterday from Special Counsel Robert Hur that concluded his investigation into Joe Biden and found that he did, obviously, both steal and disseminate classified information. Robert Hur concluded, as you know, no charges for that. He said he can't charge him. And the rationale for why he's not charging Biden is that Biden is a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. And as a result, a jury will be inclined not to find him guilty of the behavior that is detailed in this several hundred-page report. And that includes Biden on audio telling his ghostwriter that he has classified information to use in the book. He's like, I found some classified information. I'm going to share it with you. It doesn't get much better than that in terms of evidence. And yet no charges because of Biden's senility. Now, the White House is out today saying we were telling them not to put any of this in the report. This is gratuitous. In fact, not only is it gratuitous, it's a political attack. Get this. Now, the Biden White House, which has spent all this time arguing that the Justice Department has a sterling reputation, how dare anybody accuse it of being politicized, is now making the argument that in this case, at the very least, it is politicized against Joe Biden. Here's one of the leading spokespeople for a White House that has very few people who can speak in English, Kamala Harris, today, insisting that this was a political attack on the Biden-Harris administration.
So the way that the president's demeanor in that report was characterized could not be more wrong on the facts and clearly politically motivated.
Clearly politically motivated. It's the Biden Justice Department opening fire in a political way against Joe Biden. Trying to do what? Help Trump? Is that the explanation that we're getting here? Kamala says it was gratuitous. It was inaccurate. It was inappropriate. And she practiced all of those words this morning.
I have been privileged and proud to serve as Vice President of the United States with Joe Biden as President of the United States. And what I saw of that report last night, I believe is, as a former prosecutor, the comments that were made by that prosecutor, gratuitous, inaccurate, and inappropriate.
By the way, she has an abysmal record, and during her time as a prosecutor, just awful. I don't know how she's trying to draw upon her experience to dictate how other people should do the job.
October 7th, Israel experienced a horrific attack, and I will tell you, we got the calls, the president and myself, in the hours after that occurred. It was an intense moment for the commander-in-chief.
Now listen, of course, the rationale here is that the job is too stressful for Biden to be able to think clearly. Is that what you want out of the president? Which is, by definition, supposed to be a stressful job. That's why you see presidents age as rapidly as they do during even one term in office. The White House, Kamala Harris, all arguing over the last 24 hours, all the Biden defenders, that it's not his memory in general. It's only when things are stressful. When things are stressful, he forgets stuff.
of the United States of America, and I was in almost every meeting with the president in the hours and days that followed. Countless hours with the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the heads of our intelligence community, and the president was in front of and on top of it all.
Yeah, he's been on top of everything. Dan Goldman, the Levi Strauss heir, was saying the same thing today on Morning Joe. He was insisting that, man, this Biden is just amazing. He's just phenomenal. Morning Joe, by the way, is Joe Biden's morning show. They actually are like apparently authoring the Biden presidency. Biden has reportedly been consulting with the hosts and guests of Morning Joe to figure out how to run the country, which might explain a couple things.
So he cherry-picked a couple of examples that perhaps we don't know, perhaps are in context, perhaps are out of context.
The idea here is that Robert Hur lied to the American people. This is the claim the White House is now making, that the Justice Department under Joe Biden is lying to the American people about Joe Biden.
Related to very sensitive issues such as his son, really just to bash him, just to impugn him. And it is excessive, it is gratuitous. And the last thing I'll say, Joe, is it's wrong. I have had a number of conversations with President Biden over the last couple years, including on October 7th, the day before this interview when I was in Israel, and he called me. And his mastery and understanding of the geopolitical situation on the ground.
He used the word geopolitical just to emphasize how with it Joe Biden is.
Israel and in the surrounding region was remarkable.
Remarkable. It was remarkable. Nobody is smarter than Joe Biden. Nobody's more with it. Nobody puts together more perfect sentences. Nobody's even communicated in English with more deftness than Joe Biden. That's the Kim Jong-un style assessment that Dan Goldman has to offer today. Now, as far as Biden himself goes, he was all over the place last night. He was furious at times. He was screaming at the press. He had memory lapses as he was speaking. He couldn't even remember the name of the church that he got Bo's rosary from. Bo Biden, that is. Listen.
I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of...
He doesn't remember.
Every Memorial Day, we hold a service remembering him, attending...
Okay, so he goes on and on. Also, another portion of last night. Again, 8 o'clock at night, not a good idea to send him out. I don't know whose idea it was, but it wasn't. This is why they're playing cleanup today. They sent Ian Sams, the bald White House counsel spokesman, out to try and convince the press that Joe Biden's totally with it and the Justice Department is politicized against him. Biden, I'll get to that in a moment. Here's Biden last night. My memory is totally fine.
Your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not gotten. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Yeah, I just forgot. What about the concerns about your age? You're an old man now.
Voters have concerns about your age. How are you going to assuage them? And do you fear that this report is only going to fuel further concerns about your age?
Only by some of you.
Mr. President, you cleared up criminal liability today. But do you take responsibility for at least being careless with classified material?
I take responsibility for not having seen exactly what my staff was doing.
It's my staff's fault. That's a real leader right there. My staff screwed this up. It wasn't me. They're the ones who mishandled classified information. Never mind the fact that Biden was on tape saying, I have some classified information I'm going to share with you, person who shouldn't have it. It's right here in my house. Biden claimed last night he did not share classified information. Now, here, this is a fun game. Listen to this. So Robert Hur says, yeah, I've got this audio of Biden saying he has classified information. He's sharing it with his ghostwriter. Biden had an explanation for that last night. He says, although he called it classified information, it wasn't officially classified information. Listen to the nature of the item that Biden was handling here, and then you assess for yourself whether or not you think it might be classified.
I did not share classified information. I did not share it.
With your ghostwriter?
With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not.
But the special counsel said in the report
he
that he
did not say that.
Okay.
He did not say that.
But Mr. President,
Let me answer your question.
He's screaming.
The fact of the matter is, what I didn't want repeated, I didn't want him to know, and I didn't read it to him, was I had written a long memorandum to President Obama why we should not be in Afghanistan. And I was of multiple pages. And so what I was referring to, I said classified. I should have said should be private, because it was a contact between the president and the vice president as to what was going on. That's what it is referring to. It was not classified information in that document. That was not classified.
Okay, let me pause on the concept here of what Joe Biden just laid out for you. Biden, to his recollection, and let's be careful, it could be faulty, but what he just described is that as Vice President of the United States, he put together a multi-page document with his thoughts about America's most important foreign engagement in Afghanistan, the war in Afghanistan. The Vice President, number 2 of the country, puts together a multi-page memo for the eyes of the President of the United States and sends it to him with his thoughts about the strategy for that country. And so Biden claims that is not a classified document. Are you hearing this? If classification is for anything, it's for the top 2 officials in the country to be able to speak candidly with each other about the nature of a foreign engagement the United States is heavily involved in. Am I right? I mean, the idea that it wouldn't be classified is preposterous. Also, he was Vice President of the United States. The rules are different for him than for the president. It wasn't classified. It was just, it was a friendly letter I wrote containing what I thought the strategy should be in Afghanistan. From the vice president to the president. Really? Now, like I said, Ian Sams, the White House counsel spokesman, out today trying to reject all of this, saying, oh, yeah, the Biden Justice Department is lying.
What is the issue with memory, and is it a factor that deals with his capacity to serve?
Well, I have a lot of issues with the contents of that question, and Karinge's answered a lot about the president's transparency in his medical records and his physical and things of that nature.
They refused to put the doctor in front of the press.
And I, leave that to Karinge to handle. But I'll say, I just read you this. Page 248, or sorry, excuse me. Later in the report, he says, quote, we expect the evidence of Mr. Biden's state of mind to be compelling, pointing to him providing, quote, clear and, quote, forceful testimony. I can't explain why the report veers all over the place on this issue. I can just say, and as you've heard from the vice president, you heard from members of Congress yesterday talking about their recent interactions with the president. One, Congressman Goldman from New York, talking about his interaction with the president the day before this interview.
Yeah, Goldman.
When Congressman Goldman was on the ground in Israel, and the long and intensive and detailed conversation.
Goldman's the burning bush. That guy's like you can really trust that guy. When Dan Goldman says something, boy, he's telling the truth, don't you? Ian Sams also was asked a question. Wait a second. Somebody in the press astutely noticed that the Biden administration is now attacking its own Justice Department as politically motivated.
By saying that this is politically motivated, not just gratuitous, but politically motivated, does this not also sow distrust with the public?
I reject that. I reject that question.
I reject that.
And it's in the report, the letter that the president's lawyer and the White House counsel's office sent to the special counsel to talk about the Department of Justice norms and policies that they see as being violated by some of the comments and remarks made in the report. And so, I think that that's a false equivalence kind of question because...
What? Okay, so you say that the Justice Department is violating its norms and policies to politically attack Joe Biden. And then you say the public should have trust in the Justice Department. That's what you're saying? Is that really the argument? Yeah, it is really the argument. This is the worst spin, and they've had a lot of bad spin at this White House. This is among the worst spin they've ever tried to unload on the public.
We have argued, and what we continue to say and believe is that you're not supposed to make these sorts of things according to Justice Department policy. The president, when he ran, and you guys all know this because you heard this, talked about how important it was to restore the rule of law. And
which is why he's arresting pro-lifers and trying to throw them in jail for a decade.
Understands that. And he talked about this last night, to MJ's point, about the appointment of the special counsel and sort of how he felt about that. This is a president who is committed to restoring those norms. And
also another piece of this, yeah, norms, please. They're throwing January 6 people in jail. They're throwing journalists in prison. It's disgusting. But it's interesting. They've been asked multiple times now if they still have confidence in Merrick Garland, because remember, Garland's the one who made the decision to appoint Robert Hur as a special counsel. Now, mission accomplished. There are no charges here. There are no charges here. It's just a report they don't like, and they realize hurts them politically because people start to get confirmation of their suspicion that Joe Biden has lost it. But every time they're asked today whether or not he still has confidence in Merrick Garland, they've been dodging the question. Ian Sams has basically said, well, the president addressed this last night when he talked about the special counsel. No, he didn't. In fact, when Biden talked about the special counsel appointment last night, all he said was that he was fine with a special counsel being appointed for both him and for Donald Trump. That was his answer. He thought, this is good for the American people. I thought this was good. And look, they've exonerated me. That's great. He didn't address, A, his dissatisfaction with the special counsel, and B, as a product of Merrick Garland. And so on the left, I can assure you, I'm seeing it all over the place right now. They are furious that Merrick Garland even appointed Robert Hur. Now, again, mission accomplished for the left, no charges. And they're running around saying he's fully exonerated today. But they're mad that there's even a criticism of Joe Biden's mental state built into this. And for Robert Hur's sake, I mean, if the White House wanted him to exclude this, if you exclude that detail about Joe Biden forgetting everything, you lose the excuse for not charging him. Remember, the report itself says the reason he's not being charged is because of his mental lapses. That's what it says. And if you exclude that, well, there goes the reason for keeping him away from federal charges. Yeah, so they want it every which way. Okay, it's not lost on me. I know the phones are blowing up right now. Everybody wants to talk about this, and my plan is to take some calls coming up. But first, we've got to get to James Rosen, the White House correspondent from Newsmax. We will talk to him about what's going on at the White House right now, a very desperate spin operation underway. James Rosen's not falling for it. He'll join us next. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 3:35, Newstalk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the show, Tim Graham from Newsbusters joins us at 4:30 with an overall assessment of the media this week. And Joe Biden's decision, which ratified apparently in a big way by the news in the last 24 hours, not to sit down for that Super Bowl interview this weekend, the traditional Super Bowl interview. He's skipping it. Luke Rosiak will be here at 5:30. We'll talk about the state of affairs in Fairfax County schools. Crazy story ahead. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
If the special counsel says President Biden's got significant limitations on his memory, then who is helping him run the country?
The President of the United States runs the country. The Commander-in-Chief runs the country.
How can he be trusted with the nuclear codes if, I get that you're saying that nobody in the building would say that he's got an issue with his memory. But just a little part of what we get to see, he's made mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake on camera this week.
So I'm going to be very clear here. The reality is that report, that part of the report, does not live in reality. It just doesn't.
So the special counsel is lying about the president's memory.
It was gratuitous. You heard from Ian Sams, my colleague. It is unacceptable, and it does not live in reality. That is just the facts.
All right. The White House today, their spin on this is the Justice Department is leading a politicized attack on Joe Biden, and they are lying about his mental capacity. Joining us now is James Rosen, the chief White House correspondent for Newsmax and the author of the great book Scalia. Sir, good to have you with us.
Great to be back with you, my friend.
It must be a wild time. I know it's always wild at the White House, but boy, have you ever seen anything like this?
No, for the simple reason that there's never been anything like this. To see the President of the United States, the sitting President of the United States, questioned aggressively by the White House press corps simply following the news of the day as to the well-being and caliber of his cognitive fitness, there's never been anything like it.
I remember it wasn't that long ago, you were basically the only one in the White House press corps, with a few exceptions, who would even ask a question about his mental fitness, and often to kind of shudders and laughs from the rest of the press corps. Not so now.
I would only correct you to the extent of saying I was one of one at the time. The president gave a news conference on January 19 2022. This was the famous news conference in which he said that Vladimir Putin has got to invade. He's got to do something at this point, given the buildup along the Ukrainian border at that time. And in any case, yes, I asked a question at that time about the president's cognitive fitness and the already grave concerns that were registering in public polling about it. And he didn't spend a whole lot of time on the answer, and I paid a high price for it. Between Jen Psaki and Karinge Jean-Pierre, who were the press secretaries over the next 8 months, I was not called on in a single briefing for 8 months' time.
Yeah, that's the punishment. They refuse to work with you then. So have you noticed one of the things that we're seeing here from our perspective, and I know you're at the White House right now, is it looks like a lot of the various White House talking points on a whole host of issues are all running into each other right now. For instance, one of them is that for years the Biden White House has been claiming the Justice Department is totally independent and is a great institution that Americans should trust. Now they're simultaneously trying to make a case that the Justice Department is actually politicized against Joe Biden. Can you untangle that for us?
Well, the pretzel becomes even more tangled because while on the one hand suggesting that the independent Justice Department works its way through cases and without any interference from the White House, and that anyone who suggests otherwise is damaging our institutions. Here, of course, we just saw the vice president today say that the special counsel was politically motivated, and which would seem to echo the kind of criticism from the right of the Justice Department, and would seem to contribute to the damaging of our institutions. At the same time, this White House endorses the overall conclusion of this special counsel, whom they allege to be politically motivated, that there shouldn't have been any charges brought in this case. So it's a kind of a pretzel logic, if you will, to borrow a title from Steely Dan.
Yeah, so there you go. So we should believe portions of this report, but we should believe that other portions are lies, is the White House. That's the talking point at the moment.
And the specific contention is over the president's memory lapses during the 5 hours of interrogation that he endured with the special counsel and his team over 2 days last October. And as we all saw yesterday, the special counsel's report concluded that Mr. Biden could not remember either the beginning or ending year of his vice presidency and could not place within several years the date of death or the year of his son. We saw the president that. But it seems that the transcripts would put this quickly to rest as to whether this was exaggerated by the special counsel or somehow misrepresented. And today, the White House counsel's spokesman, Ian Sams, appeared before the White House press briefing for the first time in more than a year, and was asked directly if the president and attorneys were willing to allow the release in full and unredacted of those 2 days of transcripts of interrogation of the president by the special counsel and his team. And Sams was non-committal, saying it was something they would look at. Certainly concerns about discussion of classified materials in those sessions. But as one noted, the discussion of his dates of vice presidency and the year when his son died, none of that would be classified.
Yeah, and by the way, it's a little challenging to hear you because your signal's breaking up a bit, but just so people can understand it, but what I gathered is Ian Sams was saying that they're considering but non-committal on releasing the transcripts of the exchange with Robert Hur, between the president and Robert Hur. James Rosen, in your view, it seems to me the White House, one of the explanations, to the extent that the White House acknowledges this is real, that the president wasn't giving ready answers to questions about timelines. They said they want us to understand the context of this, which is that the war in Israel had begun as Hamas led their terror attack there. And therefore, Biden may have been a little too distracted and stressed out to be able to answer readily. Is that the explanation?
It seems to be between the lines what White House officials and even the president yesterday himself have been saying. The case they've been making, that they've tried to portray it as a demonstration of the president's commitment to get the special counsel and his team everything they needed as soon as they needed it. They even interrupted his management of this international crisis on the 8th and 9th of October to have these sessions. What no one pointed out is that the mere fact that the president was sought for this testimony and that it interrupted his management of an international crisis reflects his own actions. And we wouldn't want to see any commander-in-chief interrupted during an international crisis, let alone for a special counsel investigation that is entirely, in a sense, of the president's own making.
Right, and ultimately that special counsel does actually work for Joe Biden. Biden could tell him, no, it's not happening today.
He could have delayed it. That's correct. But let's step back here. This was a low moment for the Biden presidency, and more broadly for the American presidency. We've seen low moments before. For example, when President Nixon declared in November 1973, "I am not a crook," and here we have President Biden declaring, "My memory's fine," after two mistaken references to dead world leaders in the same week, and even in the very same session where he said his memory is fine, he identified the president of Egypt as the president of Mexico. And to see an American president and then his press secretary and his various aides questioned aggressively about whether the president has his full faculties, as I say, we've never seen anything like it in official Washington, and it represents undeniably a low moment in the annals of the presidency.
Have you noticed, I certainly have, a tenor in the shift of the press's attitude towards the Biden administration in the last day?
I say necessarily toward the administration, but certainly there seems to be an aroused vigor on this particular subject.
Yeah, definitely. On the issue of classified material, the report alleges that Joe Biden willfully retained and then disseminated classified material. Biden offered an explanation last night. He claimed that, it was actually in sharing information with his ghostwriter. I shouldn't have said classified. It was just a letter that I wrote, a multi-page memo that I wrote to Barack Obama that contained my thoughts on the war in Afghanistan. It seems to me, James Rosen, just again from my perspective, that the number 2 and number 1 officials in the United States having a secret conversation about the strategy in our number 1 foreign conflict is almost the most obvious example of something that you would consider classified. Is that as bizarre to you as it is to me?
Well, there's no question that would be classified material. And there were classified markings all over these materials, and some of these materials were designated classified at the TSSCI level, which is the highest classification level available, which is top secret, sensitive, compartmented information. The Special Counsel in his report seems honestly at times to have bent over backwards to avoid charging the president with these records, saying at one point the president should have known. He discussed with his ghostwriter and read to him his own unfiltered notes from meetings in the NSC that he was a classified writer, but I conclude that the president was known for sure that he was disclosing classified information. I mean, that seems tenuous as a conclusion at best.
Yes. Okay, one of the other pieces here is the White House had apparently argued, and the White House is by its own admission saying this, vigorously, to have the language about Biden's memory struck from the report prior to its release. But my impression was that language was essential for understanding why Robert Hur wasn't pursuing charges against Biden, that his lapses in memory would convince a jury not to go after him.
Right. Hur was saying, in essence, that the president would appear before any group of jurors incapable or not competent to stand trial. And yet here you have the White House saying that's all too. We've all spent time around him. The American public sees what they see as well.
Yes.
I have to say, too, from the perspective of the reporters in the White House press briefing, perhaps the crime of which the president was, if he acknowledged his guilt, to use the writer, inexcusable.
I'm sorry, just because you broke up a little bit there, I'm going to see if I can hear you say it this time. So he acknowledged his guilt?
In the eyes of the White House press corps, perhaps the greatest crime, and one to which the president confessed his guilt on national television, was his use of a ghostwriter. Inexcusable.
I see. I know. I do like how that, like, at this point, like, he's just admitting it. And of course, that's the story of Washington. So many people, but not James Rosen. He wrote a great book. It's called Scalia. Sir, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time today. White House Correspondent and Newsmax.
Thank you so much, Vince.
Good to talk to you, as always. The excellent James Rosen, who I could hear. I was listening to the press conference today. Heard him shouting out questions, and they're just moving on. They're trying to avoid the guy who's been asking all of these questions all along. That was James Rosen. Let me turn here to our phone lines and take a look what we have pouring in right now. I've got Sam in Alexandria, line 6. Sam, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, thanks, Vince, on this great 63 degree February day.
Yeah, it's really nice. I should say, just because you pointed out the temperature, I just want to add, just my brain goes this way. Biden is meeting with the German chancellor right now. They have a fire going inside of the Oval Office for some reason. I do not know why. It's 63 degrees outside, Sam.
Probably because they got his AC turned down to just to mimic the climate change or something.
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, what really struck me first, and I was just watching TV last night when the breaking news came on for his presser, and what really struck me and made the impression is it kind of brought me back to my childhood when I would watch National Geographic, and you'd see the wildebeest or the zebras coming to the edge of the river, and you see all these little humps in the river, which all of a sudden appeared out of nowhere, and then of course you have the one that they push in the water. And all the crocodiles or piranha or whatever the threat use would be would just swarm it. And that's the first time I saw where this press corps swarmed on this president like a pack of wasps.
No, actually, I'd go even further, Sam. I'd go further. This is like in Jurassic Park when they lower the cow into the raptor enclosure. It's just to feed them. That was last night. That was what was happening. And you start to wonder, you're like, man, they're really just getting this guy to go out there and just finish off what's left of his presidency on national television, aren't they?
And I think that's what it was. I mean, because they know him, they know the time of the day, and they know the subject matter. Why would you do that unless it's like, okay, this is how we are going to lower that cow or that goat into the pen.
Yeah.
And when the harness comes back up, there's nothing but a leg swinging from it.
It's just amazing. It really is. We're witnessing a really fascinating time. And again, I know there are people who are fully convinced, and may be right, that this is all kind of planned out, that they're trying to usher Biden off the stage, and that might be the case. It may be orchestrated, or it just may be chaos, which happens a lot too. But either way, we're all seeing it in real time. Sam, thank you. I appreciate the call as always.
Yes, sir.
All right, hold tight. I do want to take more calls here. All right, let's go to line 3. That's where we find Dave and Laurel. Dave, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, sir. Dave, you with us? Check, 1, 2. All right, let's try for Dennis in Annapolis, line 6. Dennis, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Vince. I'm a physician, and I have a real problem with the White House physician when in his annual evaluation. That's Kevin O'Connor from George Washington University, of pronouncing Biden. You know, he signed a document pronouncing Biden fit to fulfill the duties of the presidency, and he's clearly, you don't even need MD to see that Biden is not fit to fulfill the duties of the presidency. And so the special counsel basically did what the Kevin O'Connor failed to do a year ago.
Yeah, and I noticed, one of the criticisms here, Dennis, you're a physician, perfect person to ask. One of the criticisms that the left is raising today is, well, how dare Robert Hur? It's not like he's a neurologist. Well, I don't know. I mean, he's listening to the president, and he's asking him very basic questions, like, when were you vice president? And when did your son die? And if he doesn't have answers to those questions, and then Robert Hur writes them down, that does seem significant, no?
Yeah, yes, and it's his way, that's his path to not indict or charge Biden with anything. You know, that's his explanation and his rationale. You can't have it both ways, I think, like you've implied before.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, for sure. If you remove that from the report, then you've got to charge him.
Right. Exactly. You can't have it both ways, and that's what the leftists want. And can I make one more point?
Please.
Is that you had these armchair psychiatrists, liberal psychiatrists, when Trump was president. Yes. Oh, he's unfit, he's unstable, blah blah blah. Where are they now?
I know.
Where are they now?
How many 25th Amendment articles, Dennis, did we have to deal with? Yeah. We like a constant drumbeat from the news media. It's time for the 25th Amendment. We got to remove him. Where is all that today?
Psychiatrist from Yale, Brandy X. Lee, who's like was leading the charge against Biden. I mean, not Biden, but Trump, about him being unfit and unstable to be a.
Oh, you really were tracking this. You're all the way down to the physicians at Yale. You know exactly how this all went down.
Yeah. And where is she now? Where is she now?
Oh, I know where she is. She's in hiding. She's not going to say a word. This is a very Soviet moment we're living through. Dennis, thank you very much for not only being a physician, so we can rely on your expertise there, but also having a good memory, which is getting harder and harder in America, isn't it? They lie so much, you forget what happened. Hey, coming up on the program, we're going to talk to Tim Graham from Newsbusters. That's about a half hour away. Luke Rosiak is going to be with us, and more of your calls. We've also got the Vladimir Putin Tucker Carlson interview to get to. A lot ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.